Well, good afternoon, everyone. And, one thing about these reports from D.C., you never know what the next day is going to bring. Yesterday morning, after taking way too much time, there was finally a deal reached to avert a government shutdown and also to make sure, particularly for our fellow Virginians in Southwest Virginia, they would get the disaster relief they've been patiently waiting for months. And now you've got the most inept Keystone Cops Republican House leadership that couldn't do a one-car funeral as opposed to putting the bill up. Basically saw that deal completely unravel when the richest man in the world started tweeting out just plain untruths about what's in the deal. And I should remind you, Elon Musk has more followers online than Donald Trump. And then you got Donald Trump and J.D. Vance coming in and killing it yesterday afternoon. I can't think of a more cruel, heartless, stupid maneuver a few days before Christmas. And we are going to feel this in Virginia at unprecedented level. I mean, many of you may say, well, what do I really care about whether the federal government shuts down? Well, if you're going to get on an airplane anytime after Friday and go visit a loved one, and you got to realize your TSA employees are not getting paid, your air traffic controllers are not getting paid, some of them may call in sick, you're going to have a level of chaos at our airports that I fear could be unprecedented. If you're part of the tourism economy in Virginia and our national parks shut down, and that tourism dollars around the Christmas holidays are what you need, well, yeah, if you're a federal employee, you ultimately may get paid back sometime down the line. But if you're that small business or restaurant that's outside the national park or outside Shenandoah Drive, you don't get repaid. If you're a family that budgets week to week and you work for the federal government, you're not going to get a paycheck until whenever the government would reopen. And Virginia is more dependent on government contractors than any other state. Your future pay may be put in jeopardy as well. I was just in Hampton Roads earlier this week, and with the ship repair industry. It's stupid enough to have a continuing resolution where people can't start on next year contracts and we drive up costs. But as early as Monday of this week, we still thought the absolute stupidity of a shutdown was not going to happen. And listen, I had a career in business before I was in politics. I've done a lot of deals. I know Donald Trump says he's a deal maker. Well, you don't do a deal and then renege, which is what happened at the 11th and a half hour. You're playing with people's lives. You're playing with a level of economic uncertainty. And to do this literally 4 or 5 days before Christmas and Hanukkah, is this what we're going to see, kind of governing by chaos for the next 4 years? And I go back again to the so-called House leadership, which may be an oxymoron in terms of leadership. For them to allow this to happen and then kowtow and walk away from something that was their deal, leaves us all straining a little bit. And the remarkable thing again about the House, and I'll get to the questions, but the fact that the so-called House leadership still listens to a whole group of MAGA Freedom Caucus way out there folks who are never going to vote for any budget, and yet they still dictate terms. I thought I'd seen it all, and again, I know we have seen these before, and there still could be some 11th and a half hour effort, but this is why Virginians and Americans lose faith in their governing institutions, when people act so irresponsibly and have so little value that when you actually shake hands on a deal that you're going to honor that. And I've been doing business a long time. This kind of behavior in the business world, I wouldn't do business with the people again. In this framework of our government, though, you can't choose who you got to do business with. We got to get government funding and keep the government open. But that path forward, as of 12:35 on Thursday, is very unknown, because you just can't trust anything coming out of at least the House Republican leadership at this point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura for questions.
Okay, great. I just want to hear you, kind of explain, like what the path is forward in terms of averting a government shutdown. Like, what does, is there anything that Democrats can do or that the local delegation can do to, try to keep this from happening? One,
Virginia gets hit harder by a government shutdown than virtually any other state. We've got lots of national parks and monuments. We've got lots of federal employees. We've got the Navy. We've got our military, government contractors. I think any responsible member, I don't care what political party you belong to, they isn't willing to do all they can to come up with plan B or C. I don't know how you could go home to your constituents and say, I'm sorry, this was our Christmas present. We're shutting down the government. On the other hand, too, I don't know how, you do business or a deal or an agreement with somebody if they're going to renege. And the truth is, at least what I was told, and I was deeply involved in some of these negotiations over the weekend, we've let the Trump administration team know what's going on. Well, Mr. Musk is a very successful business person. I have great respect for that business skill. But some of the things he was tweeting yesterday just were not true. And is that the way he and Donald Trump are they co-governing now? Are going to move forward? So yes, I do think, especially my Republican colleagues, and we all work together in the Virginia delegation. But, how can you trust the word? This was the Speaker's deal. The law, the rules of the Senate, and are that these funding deals have to start in the House. The Speaker is the leading figure. It is a Republican majority. How do you do any agreement if they're going to renege 5 hours later? So I think if we had an ability to, I still believe, I was with a lot of my Republican Senate colleagues last night, to say they were aghast would be an understatement. But we can't even technically start the bill here because it is a spending bill. You go back to the Constitution, it has to originate in the House.
Senator, the next question is from Tyler Englander with WRIC.
Hey, Senator, thanks for doing this. I asked Senator Kaine a couple of minutes ago the same question about, even though the post office is self-funded, is there a concern that packages, mail may be delayed as the result of a shutdown? As you know, Virginia already experiences some delays compared to previous times.
Listen, we've been trying to work on improving the performance of the post office for a while. And while it is independently funded, the overall notion of a shutdown and how that affects all government agencies, I think I would be worried about package delivery. going forward. I would be worried. Again, you think about the fact that we're saying 5 days before Christmas that air traffic controllers, we don't think you're valuable, so we're going to not pay you as long as this political baloney goes on. That could potentially affect not only the kind of traveling public, but also, delivery services and other things. I think this kind of chaos being thrown into the holiday season, I think we should expect longer delays at airports. I think we should anticipate potentially delays in terms of package delivery. And I think the idea of families, not just government employees, but the businesses that are adjacent to government facilities, they don't get paid back. And folks around our Virginia tourism, why do this self-inflicted harm on the country? I've done this a long time, but it's just cruel that anyone would think, pulling the rug out from under the feet of people who've worked in good faith to try to get a deal. And nobody liked the deal entirely. I got a lot of things that I didn't like in the continuing resolution. But the art of governing is also the art of what's possible and recognizing you got to compromise. Short answer, package deliveries, airport lines, you name it, in the busiest travel and package delivery time of the year, yes, there'll be delays and disruptions.
Senator, the next question is from Maddie with Nexstar.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking some time today. I had a question on a slightly different topic with the Supreme Court agreeing to review the TikTok law. Are you confident that the court will uphold that ban?
I'm confident that it is in the national security of the United States not to have TikTok ultimately controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And the remarkable thing about that is 80% of Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate agreed. I'm confident as well that the appellate court that heard TikTok's appeal unanimously said, of course Congress can pass a law. We don't want to get rid of TikTok. We just want the ownership not to be in the hands of a nation that is an adversary. I wish I could say that with the overwhelming legislative backing, with the unanimity of the appellate court process, with the fact that actually the irony being Donald Trump was the first guy to acknowledge and educate Americans about this problem until he flipped his position, I would hope the Supreme Court and expect the Supreme Court to do the right thing. But I have been, I, like now the vast majority of Americans, have seen our faith undermined in the ability of the Supreme Court not to be unduly influenced by political forces. And I pray they do the right thing because it's in our national security.
Senator, our next question is from Chris Horn with Wavy.
Hi, Senator. Earlier this week when you were in Hampton Roads, you expressed your outrage about the lack of information about drone sightings, especially with your position as chair of Senate Intelligence. Has anything changed in the last 3 days? Do you expect any new information anytime soon?
Tim Kaine, Governor Youngkin, and I are going to get a brief in a couple hours. And the level of information flow or the willingness to take this at the level of seriousness, I've been hugely concerned. And again, I'm chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I'd love to be able to sit here and tell you, don't worry, we've got it all explained, but part of it's classified. I can't tell you that. I do believe the overwhelming majority, 90% plus, maybe 95 or 98% plus of this are probably sightings of commercial aircraft or drones that have already been appropriately registered. But the slowness of the Defense Department to realize you've got, I'm not going to call it a full panic, but at least you've got folks, understandably concerned, and not to kind of be more forward-leaning is totally unacceptable. And you will hear more from me after the brief today. And if I don't get clear answers, let me just say this. I expect to get clear answers this afternoon, or hold people accountable for not giving clear answers.
Senator, the next question is from Elizabeth Beyer with the Cardinal News.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for your time today. So I'm hoping you can provide insight into how add-ons end up included in CR bills and why those add-ons have caused so much drama this time around.
Well, first of all, and this is not an add-on, we have to do disaster relief. It's nobody's fault in Southwest Virginia that there was a storm of the century, and we pale in comparison to what happened to our friends in North Carolina. So anybody would call that an add-on doesn't understand the political process. Anybody that says it's an add-on, if you've had your SBA disaster loan approved, but Congress hasn't filled up the bucket, it would be the height of irresponsibility not to do that. Had there been, if the Speaker had or if rational heads, they should have gone ahead and finished the federal spending for the whole year. We're already 3 months late. But everybody's saying, no, we want to kick the can until President Trump comes in. And then you've got people saying, particularly on our Republican side, saying, well, gosh, we want to make sure there's money to take care of farmers who will get hit by Trump tariffs. Remember, Trump said tariffs are going to come in, it's going to be beautiful and perfect, and it's the most perfect word in the language, I think his words. This is a tax. It's going to raise prices. So if you want to say, well, let's pre-position for this tax that will hit farmers, if you want to open up that add-on, then yeah, maybe there ought to be some other things in terms of, for example, one of the add-ons that's so-called add-ons, but I think it's hugely bipartisan. Pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. These are the middlemen between drug companies and pharmacies. They have the most obscure pricing, no transparency at all. They collect a lot of the money. Who pays more? The consumer for drugs. So PBM reform was put in this bill. Common sense. You can call it an add-on, or you can call it a reasonable reform that's bipartisan. But this was happening because the House leadership wanted all these additional goodies, and they want certain things. There's a give and take. That's called governing and the art of compromise. The ineptness of the House leadership to then have the rug pulled out from under them and leave Americans, if this goes to Friday night and the government shuts down 5 days before Christmas, just remember who brought this piece of coal under your Christmas tree come next week if we're in the middle of a government shutdown.
Senator, the next question is from Kelly Cyanowski with Potomac Local.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for your time today. I want to ask, you've been in the office since about 2009. We've been in this position where the government has been on the verge of a shutdown let's say 8 times in the past 15 years. If you combine that with the fact that in the past year or two, we've seen a lot of the misinformation claims that Trump put out during his term actually turned out to be true and factual, how are we going to change things so that all of our citizens can have confidence that the government, both parties, is working to resolve things and change things so that all of this political theater stops happening?
Again, I would welcome a review of the last few years. There was the very famous Trump shutdown that lasted 35 days. Find me any Republican that didn't say that was the Trump shutdown. God forbid we go into a shutdown Friday night. Find me any Republican, at least privately, that this is being caused by changing what had been agreed to by the Democratic and Republican leadership. Find me anybody who will say rationally that's not the cause of this. And in terms of I would be happy to go through many of the tweets that came out from Mr. Musk yesterday that are just factually not true. And ma'am, if you're part of the group that believes that, for example, that Russia didn't actively intervene in our elections in 2016, I would point back to the bipartisan 5-volume Intelligence Committee report that was under Republican leadership that cites chapter and verse and every part of our intelligence community who validated that interference. And we have seen nation states continue, China, Russia, Iran, to try to interfere in our democracy. Those are facts, and I will stand by the work of that committee, and I'll stand by the intelligence communities who candidly revealed that. So welcome that further discussion going forward.
Sir, the next question is from Joshua Janey with the Virginia Pilot.
Hi, Senator Warner. I was wanting to know if you could elaborate more on how the government shutdown, if it happens, would impact the Hampton Roads area specifically. Hampton Roads has a huge military and defense presence, and I'm wondering if our region might be more impacted by the shutdown than the rest of the state.
No, I think Hampton Roads would be ground zero for a government shutdown. I think it would be probably worse than not only any place in the state, but I'm not sure there's any place in the country of a market size of 2.5 million plus, and if you go up the peninsula, closer to 3 million people that are going to get, it's like a kick in the gut. You're going to have all of the private sector government contractors not being paid. You will have even our military, the military will get paid, but the civilian workforce will not. They will get back pay once the shutdown ends. But you will have, this is taking the stupidity of the CRs, which, for example, in ship repair, slow the process and bring it to a grinding halt. There were so many of the ship repair businesses that I met with earlier this week. Because of the CR, they don't get paid. Their businesses are now in jeopardy. They have to put their house up as collateral to the bank. You have a shutdown. How many of those businesses are going to just simply say, okay, I got to lay off my workforce? Or maybe I got to shut down because this is just too crazy. And we think about the defense industrial base, the great men and women who build our ships, service our ships, repair our ships. Who's going to really want to go into that field if you got to go through every 6 months or every year or two a shutdown? No business operates this way. And again, I respectfully go back to some of the earlier questions. Let's acknowledge there was a bipartisan deal that was made. Was it perfect? No. it would have passed until other forces intervened. And again, Hampton Roads is ground zero for government shutdowns. And while federal workers will be repaid when government reopens, I know some people were saying let's leave it shut down until Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. That kind of comment shows a remarkable lack of fiscal understanding of how government works, and again, it just comes down to almost just cruel. Ground zero, Hampton Roads.
Senator, the next question is from Audra with Sinclair News.
Thank you so much. Just following up on the TikTok question. As you said, 80% of Congress, Republicans, agree it's a national security risk. However, Trump now says he has a soft spot for TikTok because he won support from youth. And it seems now that the flattery of that has made him want to keep TikTok around despite the national security concerns. Are you worried now that Republicans beholden to him are now going to turn their backs on the national security concerns because now Trump likes TikTok? Thank you.
Again, the facts haven't changed. And let's also remember, 40% of the ownership of TikTok is owned by a company named ByteDance, are American investors. They made a lot of money. I'm happy they made a lot of money. They can still make more money. Just sell the company or change control so it's not controlled by China. And again, there's a lot of creativity on TikTok. I think that's great. I love the fact that people can make a living as social influencers. But the absolute irony of the fact that it was Donald Trump who first said this was a national security concern, and his Treasury Secretary who worked very closely with, had to convince me. Then seeing how changing the algorithm can manipulate what videos you see, and when young people increasingly get all their news from TikTok, if anyone thinks that the Chinese Communist Party is not willing and able to put out propaganda through that tool, you wouldn't get 80% of Congress to agree on anything like this unless there was solid evidence. And I think TikTok's great as well. Let's make sure it's not used as a way to collect information on Americans or as a propaganda tool. And again, President-elect Trump, I'm looking forward to working with him where I can, but our competition with China in technology domain after technology domain is the issue of our time. And none of the national security concerns I have about TikTok have changed. If anything, they have been increased.
Thank you, Senator, for joining us. Just another question about the shutdown. You've talked about this before, but with air traffic controllers and federal agencies, it's just not a matter of flipping a switch and the government shuts down. Could you talk a little bit about the impact, for example, on that, as well as the fact that this actually adds to costs for federal spending rather than eliminating it?
Yes, sir. Like any responsible organization, you don't just turn off the switch at 12 o'clock on Friday night, particularly when you've got the safety of our country at stake in terms of air traffic controllers, the safety of our food in terms of inspectors, the ability to have our ships repaired and serviced in terms of, again, our defense. So usually 30 days out before a CR expires, you have to start these shutdown procedures. So people stop doing their normal jobs and start going through a checklist of how you shut this part down and that part down and who's going to be deemed essential personnel that can still come in without getting paid, but still come in. So you are already wasting money. Closer you get to that expiration and the shutdown, those activities increase, and the number of people who have to stop their normal job of air traffic control or inspecting or to get ready for a shutdown just increases. Now, I think we've become a little immune to this. The ramifications politically from the Trump shutdown of, 5 years ago were so great. The one thing I kept hearing from my Republican senators friends was, don't worry, Mark, we'll get through this one way or the other. Had dinner with a bunch of bipartisan senators last night. Everybody's heads was spinning. So, we kind of get immune, and somebody says, well, this is political theater. This is not political theater. This is people's lives. And let's be clear. This was not the House Democrats. It was not the Senate Republicans. It wasn't the Senate Democrats. 3 out of the 4 groups up here were ready to adhere to the deal. Would people have voted no? Absolutely some, but we'd have still passed. And we could have gone through the holidays. And again, folks, for example, in Southwest Virginia who've been hurt by Hurricane Helene would know that disaster relief is still coming, and those SBA loans that then have been approved, they're going to get their money. What do you tell them now?
The last question we have is from Amy Knowles with the Virginia Dagwood.
Hey, Senator Warner, thanks for taking our questions. I wanted to talk to you about the renaming of the Lynchburg VA clinic upon the president's signature. I was actually lucky enough to be friends with Desmond Doss when I was a kid, and I can say that he was just as kind and genuine as one might hope. So why was it important to you and Senator Kaine to get this one across the finish line?
Well, I never met Desmond Doss, but like I think many Americans, I saw the film, and here was somebody who was I think he called himself not a conscientious objector, but a conscientious participant or something, and literally put his life in jeopardy repeatedly to save soldiers' lives. I think it was 75 in that battle in Okinawa, and so. Renaming the Veterans Clinic there. But I want to also give credit. It made a lot of sense to both me and Tim. But I want to give credit as well to Bob Good. Congressman Good and I, it's very few things we ever agreed on. But he started this process, and I commend him for his work on it. And I hope all of the veterans who get those critical services there in Lynchburg will remember that there are so many ways to serve, to protect our country. And in the case of Mr. Doss, you had somebody who, while his religious beliefs prohibited him from taking up arms, he still served our country and literally saved lives in combat. So it's a fitting tribute. And as always, thanks for giving me a question at the end to end on a little higher note. In Congress, things can still change. We still got 36 hours or whatever it is, but there is no reason we should be in this position. Regardless, if I don't get back in front of you, hopefully I can get back in front of you and say there's some Christmas magic in a deal. But if not, I hope you all have, you got next year or this year, both Christmas and Hanukkah on the same day, Hanukkah celebration starting. So whatever your faith tradition is, have a great holidays and the better days ahead. Thanks.